Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into a really pivotal piece of research, one that kind of sent shockwaves through the energy world back when it came out.
That's right. We're looking at a paper from 2017, so it's not brand new, but its findings were, and I think still are, incredibly relevant.
It's called On the Role of Solar Photovoltaics in Global Energy Transition Scenarios. Quite a mouthful, but important.
Definitely. And the timing, 2017, is crucial. This study really emerged from a sense of, well, frustration, I suppose.
Frustration? How so?
Well, it was looking at how we could hit those big COP21 climate goals,
Yeah.
but there was this huge gap, this contradiction between what was happening on the ground with solar and what the big institutions were forecasting.
Right. I remember this well. Solar PV was exploding, wasn't it? Like the fastest growing energy source globally.
Exactly. By 2015, we were seeing about 50 gigawatts of new solar capacity added annually. It's a massive amount.
But the official forecasts, places like the IEA, they weren't reflecting that growth.
Not even close. Their long-term projections for solar seemed, well, wildly low. They were putting out numbers that were already basically being proven wrong by the actual installation rates happening that year. It was bizarre.
So their model seemed kind of broken, or at least stuck in the past?
That's what this study suggested. It implied the underlying assumptions, especially about cost and potential, were just outdated. So the researchers posed this fundamental question.
Which was?
What is the real midterm to long-term demand for solar PV if we're actually serious about building a sustainable energy system?
Okay, and the answer they came up with, it wasn't conservative, was it?
Not at all. It basically landed like a bombshell. This study confirmed the most ambitious, progressive scenarios. It pointed to solar PV becoming the single largest, the cheapest, and frankly, the most important energy source in the long run.
A huge claim. So how did they reach such a different conclusion? The modeling must have been key.
Absolutely. The methodology was the game changer here. They used a relatively new model at the time from Lapinranta University of Technology, the LUT model.
And what made the LET model so different from, say, the IEA's approach?
Resolution, detail. Previous models often looked at energy balances maybe monthly or even annually. They'd treat huge geographical regions as single points.
Which smooths everything out, I guess.
Exactly. It smooths out the peaks and troughs.
Uh-huh.
But if you're relying heavily on intermittent sources like wind and solar, that smoothing hides the real challenge.
The intermittency problem. The sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow everywhere, all the time.
Precisely. If you only look at monthly averages, balancing supply and demand looks easy. But in reality, you need the grid to balance every single hour, minute by minute, across every location.
So if the sun sets in Germany, power needs to come from storage, or maybe wind from the North Sea, or solar from Spain, instantly.
Yes, and that's what the LUT model did, for the first time on a global scale. It performed full hourly modeling for an entire year.
Wow, hourly, across how many regions?
Across 145 subregions globally. This super high temporal and spatial resolution was crucial. It's the only way to realistically model how a 100% renewable system, dominated by variable sources, could actually function.
It forces the model to find real solutions, not just paper over the cracks.
Exactly. The model's main goal was actually cost optimization. It aimed to find the cheapest possible energy system.
Okay.
But under the absolute non-negotiable constraint that generation had to meet demand, hour by hour everywhere, using 100% renewables.
So it's finding the least cost way to make a 100% RE system actually work in real time.
That's the core idea.
Yeah.
And to really test how things like grid connections helped, they ran 3 different scenarios, sort of layering on the integration benefits.
Okay, what were those scenarios?
First was a basic region-wide setup. Think of it as quite distributed, but with no electricity trading allowed between those 145 regions. Very constrained.
Right, so each region had to be self-sufficient hour by hour. Tough.
Very tough. Then the second was area-wide. This allowed trading, but only within major world regions like Europe or North America. So more flexibility, but still some barriers.
Okay, better. And the third?
The third was the integrated scenario. This allowed full global trading between regions. Plus, and this is really important, it included demand from key industrial sectors, specifically producing industrial gas and also desalination.
So sector coupling, bringing in other energy demands beyond just electricity.
Precisely. And those coupled sectors covered about 45% of the total primary energy demand considered in that scenario. That integration proved vital for optimizing the whole system.
Right, because industry needs power, but maybe it can be flexible about when it uses it, or its processes can help balance the grid.
Exactly. We'll come back to how that helps. But first, let's look at the results. The sheer scale of PV needed is quite something.
Okay, lay it on us. Based on their 2030 cost assumptions, what kind of solar capacity did the model say we'd need?
Well, just for the electricity sector, depending on the scenario. So how much trading was allowed? It ranged from 7.1 to 9.1 terawatt peak, TWP.
7 to 9 terawatts.
Mm.
That's huge. That's many, many times the global capacity back in 2017.
It is. But that was just for electricity. When they extrapolated from that fully integrated scenario, the one covering nearly half the energy system,
Hmm.
the required PV capacity for the whole energy system jumped to 27.4 TWP.
Whoa, 27 terawatts just for the midterm transition.
And that wasn't even the end point. Looking further out, toward the end of the century, the model projected a total requirement of 42.3 TWP of solar PV.
42 terawatts. Okay, that number sounds almost unbelievable. How did they justify that? And importantly, the cost. Surely building that much is astronomically expensive.
That's the amazing part. It wasn't. Let's talk costs first, because this is where the study really blew the doors off conventional thinking.
Okay.
Remember, this model finds the least cost way to build a 100% renewable system that works hourly. For their most optimized system, that integrated scenario, the global average cost of energy came out at 49 euros per megawatt hour.
49 euros. Wait, back in 2017. That's incredibly cheap. That's competitive today in many places.
Exactly. It was stunningly low. And the reason it was such a powerful finding was the comparison to the alternative considered viable low-carbon options back then.
You mean things like nuclear power or fossil fuels with carbon capture and storage, CCS?
Precisely. At that time, the projected costs for nuclear or CCS were way higher. They were expected to be somewhere in the range of 112 to 126 euros per megawatt hour.
More than double.
More than double. So this high-resolution hourly model didn't just show that 100% renewables was technically feasible.
It showed it was dramatically cheaper.
Yes, less than half the cost of the established low-carbon pathways. It completely flipped the economic argument. Suddenly the question wasn't, can we afford renewables? It was, can we afford not to?
So the barriers weren't really technical or economic. They were assumptions baked into the old models.
That's what this study strongly suggested. The constraints were the conservative forecasts, the outdated cost figures used by major institutions like the IEA, and frankly, most of the IPCC scenarios at the time.
Okay, so we have this massive 42 TWP capacity needed long-term, but at a surprisingly low cost of 49 euro sunky. The next big question is stability. How does a system relying so much on intermittent sun and wind actually stay stable?
Right, the engineering puzzle. The model showed it relies heavily on flexibility, achieved in two main ways.
Okay, what's the first?
Geographic flexibility. Basically, moving power from where it's abundant to where it's needed. This means massive investment in grid interconnection, specifically high-voltage direct current HVDC lines.
Long-distance power lines.
Yes. In their most integrated scenario, electricity trading between regions accounted for about 14% of total demand. That helps smooth out local weather variations significantly.
Makes sense. Share the power. What's the second type of flexibility?
Temporal flexibility. Storing energy for later use. And this involves both energy storage technologies and that sector integration we mentioned earlier.
Okay, storage. What kind dominated?
Batteries. Overwhelmingly. The model found batteries provided something like 63%, 75% of all the electricity storage needed, depending on the scenario.
So lots and lots of batteries. Big utility scale ones.
Yes, but interestingly, not just those. A huge chunk, nearly half, between 34% and 54% of the demand for stationary batteries, was driven by residential PV prosumers.
Prosumers. You mean regular homeowners with solar panels on their roofs and a battery in their garage?
Exactly. Millions of small distributed batteries playing a massive collective role in balancing the grid. It's not just about big power plants.
That's a really key insight. Okay, let's circle back to that sector coupling. You mentioned integrating industrial gas demand. How did that help?
This was really clever optimization. The model used excess renewable electricity to produce synthetic natural gas, or SNG, via power to gas.
Okay, to meet industrial gas needs.
Right. Industry needs gas, often seasonally. By building the infrastructure to produce and store SNG for industry, you essentially get massive seasonal electricity storage as a very valuable side effect, a byproduct.
Ah, I see. So instead of building dedicated, expensive, external electricity storage, you leverage the gas infrastructure that industry needs anyway.
Precisely. You're using the gas storage and pipelines as a sort of giant long-duration battery for the power grid. The study actually quantified this.
How much did it help?
That integration, coupling the power sector with industrial gas and desalination, reduced the need for dedicated electricity storage by almost 30% compared to the scenario without it.
Wow, nearly a third less storage needed just by integrating sectors. That's huge for costs.
Huge. It shows the power of thinking about the energy system holistically, not in silos.
Okay, one more thing on the capacity. You said 42.3 TWP. That's massive. But you also mentioned it was actually lower than some other long-term projections at the time, some of which went up to like 90 TWP. How did this model achieve the same outcome with potentially half the generating capacity?
This comes down to something the paper called the shift to power megatrend. It's all about efficiency.
Efficiency.
Yes, the model explicitly factored in the enormous efficiency gains you get when you electrify processes previously done with fossil fuels.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about heating your home. A good gas furnace might be, what, 90% efficient? Maybe 95%?
Something like that.
An electric heat pump, though, isn't just burning fuel, it's moving heat. So it can be 300%, even 400% efficient in terms of the energy delivered versus the electricity consumed.
Right, using 1 unit of electricity to move 3 or 4 units of heat.
Exactly. Same with transport. An internal combustion engine wastes most energy as heat, maybe 20% efficient at the wheels. An electric vehicle, 70–80% efficient.
Okay, I see. So if you electrify heating, transport, industry, the total amount of primary energy you need to generate to get the same service warm homes, miles driven, drops dramatically.
Dramatically. You need far less input energy to achieve the same societal outputs. That's why the 42.3 TWP figure, while huge, is manageable. It's providing the services needed, but much more efficiently than legacy fossil fuel systems could.
And this efficiency gain was something the more conservative models were missing.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
That brings us back to the paper's core critique. Those conventional scenarios, like the IEA's World Energy Outlook or most IPCC models back then,
Yeah.
they were criticized in this paper for being based on, quote, fully outdated cost assumptions for solar PV and for failing to fully capture these massive systemic efficiency gains from electrification. They underestimated solar's potential and overestimated future energy demand by sticking to less efficient pathways.
So this LUT model, with its high resolution and inclusion of efficiency, was essentially providing the hard, quantitative evidence for what more progressive groups, maybe like Greenpeace or WWF, had been arguing conceptually for years.
That's a fair way to put it. It provided rigorous, hourly, cost-optimized proof that a solar-dominated 100% renewable future wasn't just a pipe dream, but the most logical economic path.
One last practical point. 42 terawatts of solar panels. Where do they all go? Doesn't that use up too much land?
It's a common concern,
Yeah.
but the study addressed it. They calculated the land area needed for the ground-mounted PV. Remember, a lot will be on rooftops, which is zero additional impact.
Right.
For the rest, that massive 42.3 TWP capacity, it required only about 0.35% of the global landmass.
0.35%. Okay, that puts it into perspective. It's significant, but hardly covering the Earth in panels.
Exactly. It helps show that physical limits weren't the real barrier either.
So, wrapping up the core findings from this landmark 2017 paper, a high-resolution hourly model showed a 100% renewable global energy system was feasible, likely dominated by solar PV reaching around 42 TWP capacity long-term.
With an energy supply share from solar of just over 40%.
And crucially, this system was far cheaper, at around 49 euro/MWh, than the mainstream low-carbon alternatives like new nuclear or fossil fuels with CCS, which were projected over 110 euro/MWh back then.
That cost competitiveness, demonstrated through sophisticated modeling, is perhaps the most powerful takeaway. The economics favored this transition years ago.
It really reframes the whole debate, which leads to a final thought. We've talked a lot about the incredible efficiency gains from this shift to power megatrend electrification, making everything 3–4 times more efficient. If that efficiency gain is so massive that it drastically cuts the total energy we actually need, maybe even having the required generating capacity compared to older projections, should our primary focus shift?
How do you mean?
Well, should we be pouring even more effort into accelerating the adoption of these super efficient electric technologies, heat pumps, EVs, smarter industrial processes, knowing that that itself is one of the most powerful levers we have to reduce the sheer scale of the generation and storage challenge?
That's a really interesting point. If maximizing efficiency dramatically lowers the ceiling for required supply, perhaps policy and investment priorities should lean even more heavily towards deploying those end-use technologies globally, standardizing them, driving their costs down further. because, as you say, that alone shrinks the mountain we need to climb in terms of pure generation capacity.
Something to think about. Focus on the efficiency dividend, a fascinating insight drawn from our deep dive into on the role of solar photovoltaics in global energy transition scenarios. Thanks for joining us.